Good afternoon, everyone who's tuned in. I have with us a very special guest today who I'm honored that came all the way out to Unamagi and Membertou, and we're going to do a little tour of Eskasoni today. I have with me from George Paul from Midabanagia, and I'm going to ask him to open us with a prayer, and then we're going to get on with some of the drumming and questions. So I'm going to ask George to honor us with a prayer.
Isok chiniskan waso hem nemi ekgeolagan janke modiet bigidere mektando jiglo kapuk tegnago gignumuyet elwaqt maria kiso abexit winen kitluwe udimino nur binangelo bene godandel mida wabsit am kozuwe kiso tangisi dondanda kotte kali kido
Which side? All good, buddy. Thank you. Get a little mic? Yeah. We're all good to go, guys. Man.
Nego majuk palok siek, ahuli akti gumuk siek. Tegen hoede muk siek en sirwi de ida han gelok udaek. Wanneer ik is koektan, lias het man goed niet gemaakt nog, dan deze majuk muk sit gamu. Pulasit nim sipore nego, wejit nen gelo, luo gedik, kamlamunina, pulasit nim sipore giskut, dan del det paradi, wanneer haas het maken. Zoek dan del smueg af dan del de wachtmak. Ook tjomenaro gaan ik zoek check, daar ze kies me wat ik me hebben omlopen. Maar pulasit nim sipore liach. Nim sed nog.
Hallelujah, George. So, I'd like to first off introduce myself. My name is Jaime Batiste. I'm the Treaty Education Lead for Nova Scotia. And what I do in the province is help the provincial schools and the Mi'kmaq schools in our province learn more about who we are as Mi'kmaq. And it's in Mi'kmaq History Month, is this month of October, when Kevin had asked me if there was an idea I had around what we needed to share. And one of the things that I had mentioned was that I really enjoyed meeting George Paul when I met him at the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton and hearing his story about the honor song. And so one of the things that we just recently did in Nova Scotia is we had hand drums put in many of the Mi'kmaq schools and outside schools to be used by all the schools. We had hundreds of hand drums made and then delivered to the schools. And so each school has a hand drum. And as part of that, they began to learn the honor song that George has made. Not just Mi'kmaq, but all across. And I felt that if we were going to be sharing the Mi'kmaq honor song, that it was important for students to know the origins of that song. But before we go further, I think we should have a special drum presentation. Kevin, am I correct in that? And so I'd like to pass it over to you. Kevin, can you tell me which school we're passing it over to for the song?
In Conn River, Newfoundland.
Okay, so I'll do my powwow MC thing and say, Conn River School, take it away. I always wanted to say that. Very well done, on River. So I have to ask you, George, how does it feel when you hear your song being played at powwows, at introductions, at gatherings? You know, as the creator of the song, and we'll get to that pretty soon. But just tell me, how does that feel to have your song out there?
Well, definitely, it's an honor. I mean, for me to hear other people singing the song and sharing it, no matter where it is in this world, you know, and people understand that, you know, the respect and honor that we should have for our identity as a people. And I think because it's traveled so far now, it has merit to what the song is.
Well, I want to ask you, in the Mi'kmaq traditions, oftentimes you get people when they ask for a presenter, you say, can you send your biography? Can you send, you know what? In the Mi'kmaq we have a word, dan wedebeksin. And oftentimes we ask people, that are coming to our territories for the first time, or your first time meeting someone, or an elder would tell you, dami wedebeksin when they meet you. So instead of asking for your biography, George, I'll just ask if you could share dan wedebeksin.
Medabanagi Ahtalewi, Nade Elijah, Ilniwaya Bapa, Ilganudumukapa, Edun Dan Weni, Aja Bugal Nida, this is school test, Pasaga, Mubidak, no time Kumugeda. So it's good to share to the people, the source of the somewhere where I come from, because I fasted over there in that burial ground that we have in West Bank, the Augustine Mound, and that also had an impact on me as well. The significance of that find, and at a crucial time when we were just entering into learning about Native spirituality and traditional ways and values. So it made me who I am as a result of that. So I made a commitment, to follow that for the rest of my life and beyond. And so if it can help other people, I think that's a positive thing, and I intend to keep doing that.
Thank you. So the biggest question I guess everyone has is, what inspired you to create such a beautiful song? And can you tell us a little about the origins of the song and what inspired you and how you came up with the honor song?
As I mentioned, I started on a journey towards learning Native spirituality back, I guess, in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And I met an elder from Obima, Alberta. His name is Albert Lightning. His spirit name was Buffalo Child. And when I met him for the first time, I had to sit down and talk with him in a private room, and he took my hand. When he took my hand, he held my hand like this, and he had this one thing that he had with connection with the spirits, that he could communicate with the spirits, and when they would come in, he would jump like he had a hiccup. He would jump like this when they come in the room. And when he took my hand, he kept jumping like that, and I didn't know at the time what he was going through. But so in my curiosity, I asked him, "Are you okay? Do you have hiccups?" Or because he kept jumping like that, right? He said, "No." He said, "There's a lot of spirits that are coming in here," and he told me that there's a lot of spirits that are following me for some reason. He said. And at that time, I haven't really done too much fasting, but I was curious about it. I haven't even really been in a sweat lodge yet, and he was the first one that I sat in a sweat lodge with. He had a sweat lodge ceremony there, and it was the hottest one that I ever experienced, because everyone that was in the sweat lodge went running out of there screaming, because it was so hot. And I wanted to also run out, but I couldn't, because the sweat and the sweat beneath my eyes.
7150012.
It was
Okay, name
preventing
me
me
down
from
when
opening my eyes. My hand, I clenched my hands like this, and I couldn't open my eye. I asked him, why can't I open my hand? He said, don't worry, it will happen in a minute. And then eventually my hands did open up. But that experience right there, started me on this journey. And I said, I want to learn more about spirituality and the power of this teaching. And I started following Albert Lightning. Every time he came down, I would go to the gatherings that they had. And he invited me to go to Alberta to visit him at his place in Hobima. And the first time he invited me was just before that one at his house, was at the world's largest indigenous gathering in Regina, Saskatchewan. I believe it was 1980. And they had Aboriginal people from all around the world there. And they were all doing their presentations inside this big stadium. And they were dancing in with all of their regalia and showing their culture and who they are as a people. Beautiful. There are people from Mexico, the Fiji Islands, they're from Australia, there are people from around the world. They're Native American people from the United States and Canada, and there are people from the Yamamaros from South America. There are people from all over the world, indigenous peoples. And when they danced in and they showed their culture, which was true in spirit, you can feel it when you're watching it. That really moved me, And they went down to, when it came to Canada and all the tribes in Canada with the Shuswap and the Salish and the tribes there with their regalia and the dances that they have. And going towards the east, they had the Cree and they had the Ojibwe and they had the Mohawk. When the Mohawks came in, it was kind of haunting when they came in because, their songs are sort of echoing and kind of haunting and very moving. And that really touched me. I said, I can't wait to see when you come to the Mi'kmaq. But when they came to the Mi'kmaq, there was nothing there for a show, for a dance presentation. And all they had was, I think it was Noel Knockwood who did a reading of a prayer, 7 sacred prayers or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I felt, I was empty then, and it kind of hurt, so, I was kind of, saddened by that. Then we went to a gathering outside this event. They had the largest setup there of teepees. It was like being back in the olden days in one of the Sioux villages or something. There was like thousands of teepees out there in this open area. In Regina, Saskatchewan, it's a flat land. You can see for miles. And they had all of these teepees there, and they also had an area set up for a powwow. And I think it was about a half a mile around, oval shape all around for the grand entry. And they had over 2,000 people dancing in, 2,000 people that were dancing in from all the different tribes in the States and Canada. And it was amazing. They had 42 drums that were set up there, 42 drums. That's the biggest powwow I ever seen, 42 drums. But they took turns in singing because it's such a long lineup. They took turns continuing the grand entry. When I watched the grand entry, I saw all of these elders that were dancing by, and some of them were over 100 years old, or at least near there because of the map on their faces with wrinkles. And they were escorted. They were, helped along. So I knew that these elders, come from a long ways back, and they had their traditions and customs intact. And you could feel it. You could just feel it as they were going in. And they had all the different type of dancers that were dancing in, with the fancy dancers, so on, and the shawl dancers, and all the different categories of the dancers, right down to the children. Now, when I saw the children dancing in, this is what really touched my heart right there when I saw the kids because the kids were, they're only about 4 or 5 years old. This is what I wanted to see for my people. And when I saw that, it just made me cry. So I just let the tears run, and as I was standing there next to my buddy, and I didn't want him to think I was a wimp or anything because I was crying, but I was just standing there, kind of stoic, and tears were running down my face. And anyway, I had to take a moment there and think about my people back home, and I thought, why did our people, not continue their traditions, customs, and values like the people here? What did we do so wrong? Did we give up on our who we are? And it hurt me, that pain hurt me. And so I carried that in my heart. After that experience, when I went back home, I decided, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do everything that I can to express my identity and who I am. So I let my hair grow long. And it didn't matter what anybody said to me or anything. This is something that's what I want to do. And as time went on, I started getting involved with more people that were following the road, and there were sort of a handful of us. You can probably count them on your hands. There wasn't that many people involved. There was a lot of criticism. And when I asked the elder, about that, he invited me to go to his place, and I stayed in Hobima with him, and he talked many stories about his experiences and challenges that he had in life as he was going through. Because you stand out and you're going to be different, people are going to look at you that way. And as a result, you're subject to criticism. So he told me that there's a lot of people that want to be on this road and do these ceremonies and do this thing, but criticism is a very big challenge to get over. And when you're criticized, by people, you're forced to make a decision on how you react. And he said he didn't want to be violent, and he didn't want to be, aggressive to other people, because it affects their emotions as well. So he said in a lot of cases, he said nothing. Let them go on, let them talk, but, just continue in what you believe in, and don't let anything set you off track. And he said he saw people that joined the road and tried to be part of the ceremonies and stuff and get criticized, and they fall off. And they wind up being worse off than they were before, because going back again the second time is kind of like chewing your cabbage twice. And it's best to stay focused and stay in your true faith. And if you believe in this way, he said you have to believe in it wholeheartedly. So he said, you're going to get criticized. People are going to criticize you. If that's okay with you, you'll make out okay. But the worst criticism that you're going to get is going to be from your own family. And when your own family criticizes you, your mother and father and your brothers and sisters, that's the biggest challenge. And a lot of times that's when people will buckle. But you would have to, you have to make a decision. And so he was right. I did have that challenge from my father especially. He said, if you're going to do that, pack your stuff and get out of the house. And at the time I was still staying with my parents. I was still young then. But I said, okay, I respect your decision. I'll pack my stuff and I'll go. I had a teepee. I was fortunate to have a teepee. And I got that as a gift from Albert Lightney when I stayed down there, because I helped paint his teepee. He had buffalo all around his teepee. So I painted his buffalo, and he said, you did such a beautiful job. Those buffalo look like they're going to be walking off that teepee. And got good compliments from it anyway. Of course, I'm an artist, so I have a natural trend being an artist, so I try to be as realistic as possible in my artwork. So that compliment also given me a teepee. That was, I guess, his payment. He didn't pay me money. He said that I'll give you one of my teepees. He had plenty of them. So when my father booted me out of the house, I took my teepee and I went up in the woods. And I know this place in Red Bank, they call it Old Woman's Tea. And that place, there's a little trail that goes down to a creek, stream, cold water spring, so I had water. And it's cold all the time year round. And they said a long time ago, they used to pick tea down there, Labrador tea, and there was plenty of it there. Mm. And I see why they call it Old Woman's Tea. And they used to go up to a place called Sugary and make maple sugar and camp there, sort of stop off. And so I thought it was a good place to be at, but there I started getting more and more into the spiritual part of it, connecting with the environment and stuff. And I decided I was going to go out west and do a fast out there. And so, because I fasted at the burial mound first, and at the burial mound, I learned my teaching there was, when I was there, I decided one day after taking the chainsaw that I had there for cutting wood, it was smelling so gas, and I put it in my trunk of my car, and I walked along this old road because I saw an eagle up in the sky. I thought it was an eagle back then. Wasn't very many eagles in New Brunswick. And it was going through the clouds, and something told me, if you want to be sure about it, I want to take a closer look. So as I walked down that road towards there, looking down on the ground, thought maybe I'd find an arrowhead or something. I got about maybe 20 feet to the bank of the river that drops down. Maybe it goes down about 50 feet to the river there. There's a big oxbow there. And I looked up. When I looked up, I saw this great big eagle sitting there. And it was majestic, looking at me just like that. And I was so surprised to see that eagle sitting just over there, and I had nothing else to say but a bald eagle, a baktawa, and they echoed all the way. You could hear it, bald eagle, bald eagle, bald eagle. And because I'm high on this bank, overlooking the river there. And when I did that, the eagle flew off. And just kind of like just opened its wings, and the wind picked them up like a Harrier plane there and dove down. So I ran over there real quick and I was looking around. With all these birds flying around, crows and seagulls and these fish hawks. And I said, where did that eagle go? I thought that. And as soon as I did, this crow came tumbling down and swooped up. And when he swooped up, the eagle was sitting on a branch that was sticking out of the gravel pile there and started flying up the river, and I'm watching it fly up the river, and where I'm standing on this bank, there's a big round turn that goes down that way. And I saw it as it was climbing and climbing, as he took off low, he was climbing. Then he turned around. He made a big turn and he started coming back towards me. As it was coming towards me, it was still climbing. And I'm standing there, I was kind of like frozen as I'm watching it fly right towards me. And I thought he was going to attack me or something because he's coming directly towards me. But I froze and I was watching it, and it flew right over my head, and I swear if I reached up like that I could have grabbed it. It was that low. And I could hear his wings whoosh, whoosh like that, right? And I turned around as I watched it flying up over the tree line. And there was this crow that was following him, that one that swooped down probably was following it, went right inside his wings, and they were flying together like that. And I looked and I said, they're due east. They're going due east. And there's a message there, I thought, for that. And they disappeared over the tree line. So I walked back. Before I walked back, I said, there must be an eagle feather around here somewhere. The eagle was sitting right here. So I looked around and all I could see was scat. It was sitting like taking a tube of toothpaste and going like that. But anyway, I looked over here, there was this little tree and he had these two little plume feathers on it, right? And I looked at these two little plume feathers. I said, no, they're not seagull. They're not the hawk feather. They're not the crows. And the markings on it is like the markings on the eagle feather. I said, they belong to the eagle. The eagle was sitting right here. So I want to take these tokens, to help me, to help me along in my spiritual journey. I put them in my pocket. And I walked back and I felt really good. I'm uplifted now, right? So I'm walking back. And I went back to my lodge. And when I got to my lodge, I sat there. I was really, really inspired by this little incident. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm getting tired sitting there. You're sitting there all day, and my back is hurting. So all of a sudden, I decided just to lay inside my lodge there with the door open, flap open. And while I'm laying there, the door of my lodge there just fell down like that, closed. And I looked at it and I said, maybe the wind blew it down or something. So I opened it back up again and looked around. There was nothing around. And I went back and laid back in there again. And next thing you know, it fell down again. And I'm laying there and I said, this is kind of funny. So I said, I'm not going to do nothing. I'm just going to leave it like that. So I'm laying there, and it was almost like I drifted off to sleep or something, right? And when I kind of drifted off to sleep, I saw this image, like a light shining really bright, like a sunlight, and a silhouette of an Indian man standing in front and walking in front there, and he had like his bag with a pipe in it and stuff, his ceremonial bag, and he raised it up and said, you have to do a ceremony here, and this is the way it has to be done. And he raised it up like that with his pipe, and all of a sudden, when he did that, somebody or something, or at least I thought something, hit the top of that lodge as hard as could and shouted, but it was a woman's voice, which is strange, and it just went like that. And I jumped up, and as I sat up like that, I was surprised. I opened the door, I looked around, see if anybody's throwing rocks or laughing in the bushes or whatever, playing a trick on me or something, right? And to the point where he said, "Hello, anybody out there?" There's nobody there. I heard squirrels and birds chirping and stuff in the middle of the woods. So this experience right there, it was kind of like, to me, it was like an awakening. And so I sat down in my lodge, and when I sat down in the lodge, I felt this really cool, like an ice cube, going like that on top of my head there, a real cool spot on my head there. And these thoughts are going in right there. And I closed my eyes, and I could see all these faces of people, different age groups of people, old people, young people, but native people from all over, people even from South America, people from down, like the Kachina people, the Navajo, the Hopis, and the Apaches, all different native people. I could see their faces, and their faces are all coming like that. And I could hear somebody saying to me, you're going to travel, you're going to go out west, and you're going to meet a lot of people. There is where you will learn, and what you have to know. And I'm sitting there, and I'm rocking kind of back and forth like this. I'm saying, Then I realize what I'm doing. What am I doing? I'm agreeing. I'm listening to something, right? So the spirits were telling me that this is what I have to do. And so from there, I had to go out west. So that was telling me that, right? So when the opportunity came to go out west, Albert Lightning called us up to those people that he knew, that he associated with already in New Brunswick, and some from Nova Scotia too. we all decided to go in a caravan and head out west. He said, we're going to do a feast for the departed soul ceremony. It's going to take place in Kootenay Plains, Alberta. It's the largest ceremonial grounds there is here in Canada. And people go there from all over, from up north even, and all over Canada and the United States. And so we headed out in this, I went out with my sister, Yvonne, and another girl from Burn Church. Her name is Mi'kmaq now. And so we got to Fort Battleford, Saskatchewan, and got into a car accident. And while we were sorting out all of this mess that happened, it was about 5 or 6 car collision that took place, right? And we were a part of that. So my sister's car was demolished. So we were lucky to get out of that one. And anyway, the other guys came along. There was a caravan, so they came along and they observed what the situation was. Said, well, you can jump on with us and whatever. But she had to take her car to Fort Battleford, to a place, and get her insurance and all that straightened around, and all in the same day. And we kept on going to Albert Lightness. And then he took us to Kootenay Plains. When we got to Kootenay Plains, we set up the teepees. He had a bunch of teepees there, and his largest teepee, 30-foot teepee. And it's there where I decided, actually, before we went there, we went somewhere else. We were at Albert Lightness, and he said, before we go to Kootenay Plains, I want you guys to witness something. There's a ceremony taking place in 40 miles north of Edmonton, Alberta, in a reserve called Alexander Reserve, and the Cardinals are doing. Harold Cardinal and his family, right? They were doing a Sundance, and you guys could witness that. So we went up there like for a visit, and we wind up participating, in fact, and being there for a couple of days. And so that's when I participated in that Sundance for the first time. This Sundance was different from any other Sundance. It wasn't piercing. It was, there were women on one side and men on the other, and they had a lodge here for the pipe inside this dome that they had made for Sundance Lodge. And they even allowed children in there if they wanted to participate, to experience that, right? So the children were on, they built this willow fence all the way around where we stand behind, and they put willow around our heads and around our wrist, and gave us an eagle feather and eagle whistle, and to dance to the song that the elders were singing, and dance a certain way. Then you can't dance any other way. I saw this one man who was walking around and with a stick, and anybody wasn't doing anything right, like a teacher, right? Correct him. And this one man, he was trying to do like a power dance. He was getting right into the music. He was enjoying it, right? He walked right up to him and said, "No, you dance like everybody else is dancing here. This is not a powwow. This is a ceremony. Everybody dances the same, and focus on the tree and that one spot on the tree, and no other place." And they had cloth offerings hung up from the roof of this lodge, all different colors, cloth offerings, ribbons and tobacco ties and everything. And so as I was dancing myself, I was focusing on that one spot. I wasn't. He said not to look this way or that way, up or down, just that one spot and focus. And this is where something happened to me, like my eyes kind of like shifted, like a camera going like that. And all of a sudden I saw this great big field, green field, right? And I see people come over on the other side of the hill coming up, and they're coming dancing up to the hill. And I looked, and when I looked, there were all native people from all different tribes, all of the, from Native Americans from Canada and the United States, and beautiful regalia on, right? And they were singing this song in unison. It was like a very powerful song, and it was, you could hear like a choir. They're all singing, right? And then I was overwhelmed by that, and I went down. So I went down and I was rubbing my eyes. I said to myself, like, what the heck's going on here? So I was rubbing my eyes. And then this guy hit me with the stick. And he said, get up. He said, what's the matter with you? He said, you okay? You're sick? You want to get up? You want to go? I said, no. I said, I'll get up. Just give me a second here. Something in my eyes here. And he went and he hit me again. And he hurt. And I said, okay. I said, I'm getting up. He said, and he went to hit me again, and I grabbed the stick. I said, you don't have to hit me. So he said, okay then. He said, get up. So I got up. He said, focus on that one spot. Don't look this way, that way, or whatever. If you're okay, you're all right. If you're not, there's the door, and there's a big door there. He said, you can go out that door. So I kept on dancing, and again it happened. Again it happened. This time they're coming up even higher. Coming up over. I could see all their regalia, the beadwork, and beautiful regalias that they had on, and the song was really, overwhelming. I could hear it. It was like a big choir. Everybody was all singing as they were coming over the hill. And I went down again. And I knew he was going to come up and hit me. So I rubbed my eyes real quick there, and I got up before he came over. And I said, I'm okay, just something here. And that was the first experience, of something, of that. Like, it's a vision, it's what it was, And so then from there we went to, we finished the ceremony. First of all, we finished, and how we finish a fast, he said, you don't take cold water right away. Mm-hmm. When you're dry and you want cold water, right? He said, no, you don't do that in a fast, because you're going to shock your system. You take warm water, you gargle, you don't even swallow the first one. You spit it out. You gargle again the second one. And then the third one, the last one, the fourth one, then you can swallow. But a little bit at a time until it's gone. It's warm water. After that, you wait a minute, and then you can take, cold water as your system, because your system is, you're fasting, right? So I couldn't wait to eat. I mean, that experience right there. I mean, the first thing that when you come out of a fast like that, it's not even food though. It's water. Water is life, as they say. But that's one of the first things that I wanted was water. And I learned to respect water, because of that experience, that fasting experience. I learned to respect food, because of that experience. Food is sacred too. That's why we say a prayer before we even eat it. Sustenance of life. Right? So we have to respect food. And what gives us food? Birds, fish, plants, and animals. So we got to respect our environment. It's all very connected. And sometimes we just kind of disassociate that with how sacred that is and what it means. And so we went to Kootenai Plains and set up there. We had all these teepees set up there. We helped him set up his teepee. I decided I'm going to fast there. So I walked around the grounds, and they had all of these old lodges that were set up there, right? There were old sweat lodges and long houses, and old remnants of old lodges, ceremonial lodges that had been there for a long time. You can tell they were there; they're dilapidated. They've been there for a long, long time. And he told us that this is sacred grounds. A lot of people come from everywhere here. They go up and they fast in the mountains, and they go, whatever they do. And there's a lot of other people there too. That's the first time that I met Paul Prisk. He was from Pabino, but he had been traveling around out west already, and he already had long braids and everything. That's the first time I met Tom Paul. And Tom Paul, he had been traveling around with a lot of drumming and learned a lot of songs and stuff, right? So it was kind of like a coming together of people that we were going to wind up working with later on. And so I decided to fast on the mountain. I said, I'm going to go up that mountain and see what that's all about. So I climbed up as high as I could, and I sat on the ledge. And I'm overlooking down below there. There's trees. They look like little toothpicks down there. And I I know if I make a mismove here, I could be on one of those, skewered by those toothpicks down there. There are trees actually. So anyway, I'm sitting there. I had a pipe, small pipe that was given to me, and I took this pipe and loaded it up there, and sat down and said, I'm going to say a prayer, and I'm going to say a prayer for my people. So I lit the pipe and I raised the pipe, and this is a really clear, beautiful mountains right there, picturesque like a postcard, right? And beautiful skies, not even there might have been a wisp of cloud, but that's about all, And that time of the day, I raised up my pipe and I started to pray. As I was praying, all of a sudden I felt this little splash on my face like that, so I kind of interrupted my prayer, and I opened my eyes, and there's nothing around. I mean, I'm on a side of a mountain here. There's, unless a bird was dropping something there, but it was a clear day, so it couldn't have been rain or something. So anyway, I closed my eyes again. I continued my prayer, and again, this splashing on my face. And I'm not seeing anything out there. I said, well, I got to finish my prayer. It's like something testing me. Mm-hmm. So I continued praying. And as I was praying, I felt His presence. He was really strong. There was a really strong presence of somebody standing right out here. But He couldn't be standing there because there's nothing there. He'd have to be floating. So anyway, that presence, it got to the point that this presence to me was Jesus Christ. And I found this unusual. I'm praying here and trying traditional way, and what's this? The presence of Jesus Christ before me. And I wondered about that. But anyway, I wind up finishing my prayer, and I went down the mountain, and got to the base of the mountain, and all of a sudden it hit me in my heart. And I started feeling really sad for my people. I thought about that time when I was in Regina, Saskatchewan, when I saw all these people dancing in. Mm-hmm. Everybody all in regalia, and you could tell they're really proud of who they were, right? And that really, it hit me really hard. And to the point I started crying about it again. And I was crying and I cried. I just lit out crying and crying. I was crying, I was wailing. I was just wailing, crying. There was nobody around. Good thing there wasn't, they might have thought I was crazy. What's the matter, little boy? You lost your dog or something? But I was crying because, this feeling that I had for my people back home. So it got to the point where my eyes were dry. I couldn't cry anymore, but I was still wailing, right? And it's this wailing and this crying that I was doing that became part of the song later. So when I finished my fast, we went into a sweat lodge there, and the elder there told me, "You have a song." I didn't know what he was talking about. So anyway, he said, "That's okay. It'll come to you." So when we finished there, we went back home. And again, we had a sweat lodge ceremony over at Clarence Battleses. And this time, David Geo was there. And David Geo's from Shubi. He was blind, but he really wanted to know more about Native spirituality. And when we had a sweat there, he said, "George," he said, "you have a song. You have to sing that song. You have a song. You have to sing that song." So I was trying to think. One thing I could think about is why we are all so confused and mixed up about getting involved with Native spirituality and traditions and stuff. Maybe because it was put down so much, and criticized, and people didn't want to be part of that, so they wanted to follow the church. which had a church in every reserve. I mean, for ironically, I mean, you know, everybody was going to be following the church. So, not that I didn't. I was sent to a residential school, and I was there for 6 years. So, you know, they made us pray on our knees and the cement floor and stuff, and to the point where I really believed in what I was praying. When I was praying, really, I believed in what I was praying for, and which may be because why I saw the image of Jesus Christ, because this is spirituality, right? And this is where my first experience of spirituality was in a residential school, where they drilled that in you, praying all the time. So, anyway, I thought about my people back home, and I thought about, you know, what can I do to help? I said, I'm going to do something when I go back home to help. And when we were in that sweat lodge, the words came. And this is the words are very simple, and it's what we have to do, because you know what I saw in our communities? And drinking and fighting and drugging and stuff like that was confusing them, and perpetuating that anger and jealousy and whatever that may be, fueled by alcohol and drugs. So that's bad medicine. I said, you know, that's what's tearing our people apart. So what would you tell people that are going through that? I am a person. No, who's going to listen to me? I have no money. I have no influence. I'm not a chief. I don't. You know, who's going to listen to me if I said anything? It's just like one raindrop out of a sky. You know. And so I said, well, this song. Maybe this song will get up there. And so I started singing the song. Let us honor the people that we are, the people that has come together. Let us honor our ancestry and where we come from. Let us help one another. Let's help one another in the manner that the Creator has given us as a people in this world. And the chant, of course, you know. So, I know, I heard this little philosophy somewhere. The Creator gave you a gift of life. What you do with it is your gift back to the Creator. So, I followed that. I said, I want to take that, and I'm going to be the best darn Indian there is in the East Coast, if I can be, you know. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to wear my braids, and I'm going to wear my choker. Mm-hmm. And I walked down the mall, and people were looking at me differently, right? And you know, one day I walked down the mall, and I saw Native people. I don't know where they're from nearby communities there anyway. And I said, hey, they were just walking on the other side there. And when they saw me, when I was waving it, they looked away, like they didn't want to know me. I said, oh, well, that's strange. I just kept on walking. I said, well, maybe they're busy or whatever. And then this elderly fella came walking right up towards me, and he grabbed my hand and he shook my hand. He said, you know, some congratulations. He said, you're doing a good job there. It's that right there, what you're doing. He said, you should be proud of your culture, and that people, you know, our people have taken a lot away from you. It's good to see that. This was a non-native person, an elder. So the contrast, you know, our people sometimes can tear it. You know, like what the elder had taught me. The biggest criticism that you're going to get is from your own people, and worst from your own family. And so, from that time on, I started singing that song. Whenever we had a chance to sing the song and do the drumming, I'd bring that out, and some other songs. I used to go around reserve to reserve here in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, even in PEI and Newfoundland. We went there, and we as a group, we formed a little drum group from Birch Creek, and we went around different places, right? And go to reserve on a Friday, and in the lobby would say, "Can we do some drumming here?" You know, we just asked for some gas money. You know, me and Tom Paul and the Beach boys there from Birch Creek, and my brother Joey and Tully, we just traveled around, we were doing that, right? To the point where they started setting up little events to invite us. And I said, hey, you know what we should do here? We should start powwows here. So we went over to James Julian, who was over there in Halifax, and he was running the Friendship Center. He was sitting there at Friendship Center. Hadn't been a James, started a powwow right in Halifax. We did. He managed to do that. And we were on the committee with that, helping them and stuff like that, giving them guidance and stuff, right? And the first one I put on was back in 1981 in Red Bank. In 1981, and I invited Albert Leighton to come up. And he brought his teepee. And it was an eye-opener for a lot of people, especially for the news media. They had it on a newspaper. I think they have a clipping somewhere. But, it kind of like started a trend. And that was the start of it. And it started, because we went reserve to reserve, encouraging people to do a powwow. I was at the first powwows. I think I emceed one in Wahamatcook.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was there in Eskasoni, and they're starting their first one there. With Mike Doucette and Joel Denny and them. And also in Wegoba, with lunch, Bernard. Yeah. I was over there, and I seen they had set up this great big arbor, right? And I said, I wanted to go check it out, and it was kind of wobbly. I said, you sure you guys set this up right? Yep, but it had eagle feathers all around the edges of it, right? And that day, for some strange reason, there was an eagle came down, it was flying really low, it was all going all around there, right? And it started going up and going up and going up and going up. And it disappeared. We couldn't even see it anymore, it just kind of disappeared in the sky, just like it went up to the, to the spirit world or something, taking a message up there. And we were standing there, I said, I don't think that arbor is standing too strong, You think maybe you should sturdy it up? Oh no, it's okay. We were standing, not even less than 5 minutes, it started going, crash, and it fell down. I said, the reason why, I learned this because when we were at the Sundance, right, they put rocks inside that pole so that pole would stay still. And they hammered them rocks in there, right? They said, this is what you got to do to your arbor poles here. Put rocks inside there, dig it a little deeper, and bang those rocks in there and then cover it up. And then it was sturdy then, and set it up, and it was good. And the first powwow I emceed there, they didn't have no sound system. So I was hollering until my throat was just about gone. Then they brought in little megaphone. It sounded kind of funny, like you're in a tin can. But, in 1991, I got a chance to record with Native Council PEI. I was running a halfway house there for them. It was a pilot project for 3 years, and I was ahead of it. And when I was done, Graham Toplin, he was president then, he said, before you leave, George, you're going to record these songs, because you're going to be gone. And we want to remember them, and we want them to be heard, with our people, and we want to sing them as well. So he got a grant and sent me out to a studio there, and I took as much, he said, just Mi'kmaq songs, he said. So as much as I could remember, and everything that I could find about Mi'kmaq songs I put on there, including Jack Bisode's history song, and all the traditional songs, Ego and all them, and some of my own, some new ones. There's 5 new ones that I put on there. And that one was about Gach to Gach and the spring of the year, the canoe song, Allah Bach to which Kujima, that one. The honor song was on there. And the gathering song, and another song, there was an old man in Big Cove. He said Mi'kmaq didn't dance like the way they danced here in the powwows. He said they go 3 steps here, 3 steps here, like this. He showed me how it was, right? And he said that's the Mi'kmaq step. And that was verified by people who passed Maquadis when they went over to Sabaya. And they showed this is how the Mi'kmaq dance, and this is our steps. So I said, oh, okay, there is, songs and dances that we do that are for our people, right? And so when that tape came out, it was a cassette tape. There were no CDs then. So I started taking some of these copies that I had and taking them with and playing them at the gatherings that we had. Eventually, people wanted them, right? So I asked Graham if I could have the master reels to that. He said, yeah, sure, no problem. So I wind up getting the master reels, making a bunch of copies, and taking them and selling them at the powwows for like $10 a cassette. And then people were all of a sudden running up to me for autographs and stuff like that for that. It kind of overwhelmed me. I said, oh, wait, what's going on here? We just want an autograph, I was kind of overwhelmed by that, right?
So George, I understand that, I don't want to cut you off, but I understand that you have another song, a prayer song.
Yeah.
And, I know that we have some students around and, I think they really love to hear you sing. And so while we have time, and I'd like to take some questions, but I'd really like to give you a chance get them to hear you sing.
Okay. Yeah.
Excuse me, I mean, also in Eskasoni we have a drum group on the ready to contribute. So I know we're running a little bit late, so if we can get both of, get them on as well, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
They're going to go on now?
No, you go first.
Okay. Okay, so the honor song, I already sang that, right? So this song, I want to share with you this song here. It's a prayer song that come to me when I was in extreme pain. I had my gallbladder taken out and, I was in the hospital. They made me fast. So it was almost like going through a fast in the hospital. And when that happened, every time I go into those kind of situations, something would come, right? And this is what came to me in that experience. I call it a prayer song because I was created for help. And it's for people who want to learn how to pray, matu, or in this traditional way of praying. Kisu chinis kamwa so heimen
So I know that we ran a little bit over time, but you know, it was such a beautiful story that I wanted to hear it all, and I wanted to make sure that George had the time because it was such an amazing, powerful story. I swear, it felt like 15 minutes to me, and then I look at my clock and it's an hour. And I thought we had, so. I want to give Eskasoni Drum Group a chance who've been there, and we're going to go out to Eskasoni next, actually. So we're going to be out there within an hour, hour and a bit. But I want to give Eskasoni the chance to also be a part of this sharing of music, drumming, and storytelling. Take it away.
Oh,
Oh, Valia.
but
Well, thank you, Eskasoni.
Sorry, Commissioner Churchill, but with the relay kids,
So I guess that's the bell. But I'm wondering if there's any other if there's any questions out there. We have time for a few short questions. If any of the groups, Kevin, do you know if any groups has a question for Elder George Paul?
I'm not sure. I would like to tell you we had 15 sites connected by video and another 50 people watching, or another 50 sites watching it on the web stream. So a lot of people were there to hear your beautiful song and your words, and Malalio to all of you that participated.
So if I don't know if there's any other questions. I had one question that I wanted to ask, and that was, you know, what we're really trying to do is share who we are as Mi'kmaq in our schools. And before, you know, we have a commitment in Nova Scotia that they're going to promote treaty education and who we are as Mi'kmaq in every grade, every school, every class across the province. And we're hoping to spread that across Mi'kma'ki. But often we get we have teachers who are hesitant or don't know how to share Mi'kmaq spirituality in a respectful way. What would you say to teach? How do we best share spirituality and traditionalism in our schools in a respectful way?
Well, first of all, you have to look at who we are as a people, and understand that you know, we have been given by the Creator almost something that you have to carry out as a person, individual, right? So I believe that if you're a teacher and you're involved in educating people about identity, when you're talking about rights of people and how we fit into society today, know the history, look at the history, and you know what history has unfolded, you know, for our people, and how we, you know, come out of that. And we have to recognize, you know, that we are people with dignity, honor, and respect, you know, and the fact that we have signed a treaty with another nation, a foreign nation, and then brought it here into our homeland, where it has to be recognized and looked at as something that cannot be overturned in law, in their laws, and of course in our laws as well. So our laws are still in place as far as the Grand Council is concerned. I mean, I can't speak for them, but the Grand Council does have a responsibility for the Mi'kmaq people in maintaining our heritage and culture. And they do that to a certain point, reflecting on some of the historical ties that we have with, you know, the European countries that came here, British Crown for sure, and the French. But, you know, that part of history is important to be part of the teachings for all students that want to know about their past, their background, where they come from, and how they can apply that today with some dignity. So, you know, learning to understand what respect means is a very important part of our traditions, and that comes with, you know, getting back to nature and look at what nature is. Animals, birds, fish, they only do what they're supposed to do. They're not going to do anything different. You know, they're not going to, like a salmon is not going to jump out of the water and put on a pair of boots, because it can't. It just isn't. It's not logical. But, you know, looking at how things are in that kind of perspective, you know, we know who we are as a people. Apply that, you know, with respect, and respect will come in turn, you know. You respect people, they'll respect you. What goes around comes around. But you can't be afraid. You have to have courage. And just like I was told, you know, by the elder, you're going to get criticism, sure. You're going to make mistakes. but that's all part of it. It just makes you stronger, and it builds you into a better character. So don't be afraid to speak your mind, but speak the truth. And the bottom line is right there, speak the truth.
Okay. Thank you, George. If there's is there any other questions? If anyone has, if not, then I have a special gift for George. Oh, do we have a question?
Any here with their
Okay.
wants. Go ahead, unmute your microphone and speak up. Okay.
You're probably on mute. You got to press the mute button on your speaker.
Mute.
It might have been me.
Kevin, did you mute her?
I might have. I'm double checking. Go ahead and speak if you can.
Nu do we only again?
And you're on there.
Oh, okay. Tell we say Mabel Metallic, ni nu jiginam we list of we nuegari. Cause we imagine. Well, Darcy George, stand down the mall. He's tell Darcy, well, test will have no test keg antigonish tell Darcy Nuis hold him Louis conference. Sagunu de Martin can you do Louidum. What little chicks at lap you go together like I was Bibani Moko book sheet done when Bilginam went to Don Deloti. Parce que doet Louis Nenmen actually sudi maar nenasin moeten tagayo ik tik mi majuinu genoedemuan dan wenin en tao en melkige nachtje joa en tagedo en mi majuinu tudlo en gooi parce que doet Louis moeten tagayo jwen u shid genoedemuan ik tik mi majuinu dan wenoti Eginamo do sister yarneo eginama suri wajardigam kiswasa delaway pas na mawiyam kusaway bibanim kap nani bonad olbadoj bibanim kap wengil te am kusaway delmi ni no badoj take up gis kejo gil badoj take up pas na wenin an kamit mugunes sui daw was kudam take up gil wenos gil alasio gil nada mi se kwatayan delwa Teribit Mogeidu. Jacob Gees Wedgie and Mauyomi. Delaware, Jacob Amalkan. Delaware, Jacob Gilnamigam Watch. Gilnanu. Moom Sir Wendeladi Gasigino and Dojo Mawiadi. Aliga Dasaduk. Amalkal Dudi, Bepkujidegan. When I eat ladigadi AGS ginamogo maha des sase was a gajigiskago. Now mawi dayak bepkujere madi chiga hamakal duldiek. Now wajadi kem now baduch nentkap pochi nentkap danwinit pas nani bona. St. Thomas edelginamasi abtushu pibani kabukshid wigadi noldun. Mil bibani mijuaj, pastel mil bibani mijuaj, ukshi danu init. Na mawiyam kasway biskwad egal baruch an edel ginamwe na dari bibani kap wengil, telwa edel baruch, pasa siyaw yagan udama, klabis gisal the ganki dasid, ukshi giaski udanu enoti, upsigal keji upsigal, pasangin nige del dasi. I don't say not to scotch a dabu deuche, Gisanji, Mage, Kagisi with many. Was that wet nenasi negam luxit Mawiomi, Mawi dike, a malkal do to get a big yardim, Bepkojade mardim. Tell away modern tagari which when Ushiginam when below down when uti. Now, Pastelki could do up, you gay to Bukagistloy, well, that's in them all. Gejul nenad quiz river Isaac televisit. Ki se we disk. Malcho edge.
Ja, geloof ik dat mooi is. Hoe je ook die gemoet. Na doen ik keer doen na de andere weg toch. En als ik het ja is.
Not yeah. Yes. Okay, abnormal test? Abnormal test?
Ja.
Well, all you? I'll get in.
Well, okay. Well, that was more of a question, a comment and more of a question, talking about the importance of identity and teaching who we are at a very young age and trying to instill that within children. I think that's a good picture. But I want to give you this gift on our behalf, and within it is a copy of the Living Treaties book that was written by 17 different Mi'kmaq authors. It just came out last year. This year it received, in Nova Scotia, they have a thing about 150 books of influence as part of the 150-year celebration. This was chosen as one of them, as well as a basket. I believe it's I forget who it's made by, but it has
strawberry basket.
Yeah. And I'd like to thank George for this, and Lolalik. I think that was one of the best video conferences I ever had a chance to not only be a part of, but have a chance to listen to. It went by so fast for me. I didn't even understand how much time we were going through so quickly. So
thank you very much. Yeah, my pleasure.
And we'll be going to Eskasoni next. They're having a Mawiomi, so Eskasoni go on and we'll listen in a book check. Okay.
Walali.